Hey, what's up, everybody? The Rapture here. So, of course, the past 24 hours have all been about these Smash leaks, these quote-unquote leaks, you know, the character select screen, these renders, and then there were some more screenshots that were also posted on 4chan as the night kind of dwindled down. And it was pretty hype, you know, a pretty hype day for Smash fans yesterday, considering all the controversy and the drama around, you know, the Samus alternates from Fusion and Zero Mission, which of course people completely forgot about when these, you know, more interesting news of the leaks came out. Now, I don't really want to talk about the legitimacy of the leaks because there's really no way to know. You know, people are citing inconsistencies, which, as we know from the Pokemon X and Y leaks, just because something looks inconsistent to us doesn't necessarily mean they are, or just because they are actually inconsistent doesn't mean that it's not real. And I think that's the point I really want to drive home here, you know, at least the perspective is not whether or not they're real, but that we have to consider a lot of things in terms of, you know, whether or not or in terms of trying to decide if something is real or not. So remember from the Melee days that before the release of Melee, Dr. Mario, Marth, Roy, Pichu, all those characters were revealed in a leak. And when images kind of started coming up on the internet, people still didn't believe that, like, Dr. Mario would be in the game. And some character they never even heard of, who they thought was Roy Koopa, would be in the game, or that Pichu would be in the game. But sure enough, there they are. And then when Brawl came around, we had a guy named Chaos Zero, which posted on I believe it was GameFAQs, you know, stating that, you know, Wolf would be in the game, Lucario's replacing Mewtwo, no Ridley, and the big one, Rob would be in the game. If you guys go back to Smash boards and, you know, find those old threads, you'll see, like, the very first post of, like, every one of those threads is like, no Rob, there's no way Rob could be in the game, blah, blah, blah. And sure enough, there he is. Even though people didn't really seem to take in consideration that Rob showed up in Mario Kart DS in 2006, I believe, 2005, 2006. And so, you know, it was already established that he could show up as a character in the games, and indeed, he does show up in Brawl multiple times as a playable character, as an enemy, even as part of the Port Town Aerodive. He's in the background. So Rob shows up everywhere in that game, even though people were so adamant that Rob was not in the game that they convinced themselves out of it. And I think we're kind of seeing that again with Smash 4. If you take a look at the characters that have been revealed through the leak that haven't been revealed officially, if we're going to take this seriously, there's Bowser Jr., Shulk, Dark Pit, Dr. Mario, and then Duck Hunt Dog. Now, if you guys have been following the leaks like I have, or the fake leaks, you'll know that fake leakers are super trendy. They love to pull on trends because it gets them views, because if one leak is kind of successful and kind of gets the page threads and the posts and all that, well, if my leak is kind of similar, they'll probably talk about it in the same way. And to that extent, that's kind of what I'm seeing here again. Duck Hunt Dog was a character that showed up, you know, very once in a blue moon, because everyone assumed that Takamaru was going to be the retro representative for this game. That was the surefire. Everyone thought Takamaru was going to be the representative. You know, we had the appearance of Takamaru, or I believe, you know, references in, you know, his game, you know, Mystery Murasame Castle, was involved in Nintendo Land, which came out on the Wii U. And everyone was kind of like, oh, maybe there's like a Takamaru, like, Mystery Murasame Castle, like, reboot in the works, and he'll show up in Smash, kind of like what happened with Pit and Kid Icarus Uprising. But it doesn't seem to be the case because Takamaru was revealed as an assist trophy. Once he was revealed as an assist trophy, everyone was like, all right, well, who's our you know, retro representative? We got to pick somebody for these leaks. And the two characters that really showed up a lot was the Duck Hunt Dog and Mach Rider. And Mach Rider really didn't seem to stick because people really couldn't get around their heads of, you know, how Mach Rider would work. And not many people seem to be interested in her as a character. Whereas Duck Hunt Dog, everyone, you know, really recognizes them, and even though they don't really know how Duck Hunt Dog would work, they kind of have an idea with, oh, well, maybe it would have to work with the ducks, or someone shooting, like, the laser, or, you know, the ray gun, whatever it is, in the, you know, in kind of this weird kind of character style. At least they could get their minds around that. And once once Takamaru got, you know, revealed as an assist trophy, everyone jumped on Duck Hunt Dog as, you know, a character in these fake leaks, even though there was no evidence for this at all. So I kind of find it interesting that in the end, if this is actually real, Duck Hunt Dog is in the game, I'm kind of hyped. I like Duck Hunt Dog. But it's interesting that after all of these kind of trendy leaks, you once again have a leak where Duck Hunt Dog is involved. You also can see that Dark Pit is in the game, and Dark Pit got a lot of talk because there was a screenshot that it got around from the April Direct, which shows a little bit of, you know, debug text in the screenshot, which shows, you know, what people were assuming was HP left for a boss, which I believe was, you know, was shown to be, you know, a mistranslation, but people kind of caught on to it anyway and assumed, oh, Dark Pit has to be the boss of this stage. Now, people kind of forgot about that. They kind of forgot, oh, well, Dark Pit's a stage boss, and people just started throwing Dark Pit into talking points. And I feel like that's why we're kind of seeing Dark Pit here again. Another trendy example of, well, Dark Pit's being mentioned a lot, so my leak is also going to have Dark Pit. Then there's the case of Dr. Mario. Well, Dr. Mario I wouldn't really chalk up really to trends, more along the lines of, well, Lucina is a clone. Dr. Mario could easily be given his own clone spot. Sure. The one that I really want to point out, though, is Bowser Jr., which I think is a legitimate actual selection for the slot, and if you guys have been around since the Brawl days, has always been a pretty well-requested character. And as far as Mario characters go, probably the most requested character, other than, Paper Mario, maybe. So for Bowser Jr. to show up, not only showing up, but apparently in his Koopa car, which another leak seemed to point out, definitely kind of lends to the legitimacy of the leak. But we have to point out that Bowser Jr. shows up in his Koopa car in pretty much every game past Super Mario Sunshine. That's pretty much the only game where he is using his paintbrush, even though he seems to still be wearing his little mask or whatever, the little thing he pulls up above his head or above his face onto his face when he's going to turn into Shadow Mario. I believe he still has that, so it's kind of interesting that they mixed it. And that's where I don't know, it's hard for me to go on one side or the other, because there are elements of this leak which seem very trendy to me in terms of fake leakers, but at the same time it looks pretty legit. But I really do want to take into account here that this is not the first time where we had what looks like a really legitimate leak in terms of a character roster selection, and people are kind of choosing sides because of inconsistencies or because that's what they like or don't like. And I really think taking it with a grain of salt is the best way to go. However, I really don't want people to go around and be like, oh, well, this league, Duck Hunt Dog definitely can't be in, Dark Pit and Dr. Mario can't be in, because they definitely could be in. This seems like a pretty Sakurai roster to me. And people are also pointing out, well, there's room for unlockables. Well, definitely. When I played the Smash 3DS version, there weren't any question marks for hidden characters or anything at E3. It just seemed like as more characters would be added, the little boxes would get smaller, and the screen would accommodate for more slots, and that's definitely cool. And it seems like the 3DS version is going to do that to some degree, and that's fine. But I really don't think that we have the full roster here, because again, I don't even think I mentioned this earlier, but it just seems weird to me that the leaker would have the full roster if they are indeed an ESRB worker. Why would they have a full roster of the game? And if it's not the full roster, why would they have the not full roster? Why would they only have some characters unlocked and not all of them? That doesn't really make sense to me either. If anything, wouldn't the ESRB people have, like the E3 build or the starting roster? If that is indeed the starting roster, that's crazy. But why would this person why would this person not have the starting roster? Why would they have partial roster or the full roster? It doesn't seem to make sense to me much at all. And then we have the full stage list, it seems, for 3DS, or at least what looks like a pretty large stage list for the 3DS. This could be the starting roster for the stage list, and maybe the screen scrolls. But if it's a full stage list, why would the ESRB worker apparently have the full stage list at all? Stages aren't just unlocked easily. There's some stages that, take a while to be unlocked, at least, in the context and relative to how much time an ESRB worker would have with the game. So how would this person have all of these things unlocked, supposedly, but not have a lot of time with the game? And if they did have enough time with the game to unlock stuff, why wouldn't they unlock everything? So it just seems a little sketchy to me that this is how it's being presented. And then I also want to get into these additional screens which also came out. I'm not really interested in the claim about DLC, which apparently Lucas, Wolf, Ice Climbers, Snake, and Chorus Men are DLC. I think that's just, words. There's no evidence for that. There's no photos. And it doesn't really seem to make much sense to me for these characters to be DLC when they were playable originally. The only thing that does make sense to me is if they are going to appear in the Wii U version, and they're going to make them free DLC for the 3DS when the Wii U version comes out. That makes sense to me. But it doesn't really make sense for me if the guy just simply stating, oh, DLC in the future. But let's get to these screens right here, which have appeared after the roster was revealed. We have this screenshot which shows Charizard seemingly getting hit by an attack, or maybe that's his mid-air dodge. It pretty much looks like he's getting hit by an attack. Ganondorf seems to be rolling in some way. It looks like Shulk is doing his jab or maybe a forward tilt. And then there's another character at the top. I really can't recognize him, but it looks like another Shulk. Because if you look, it seems like his sword is kind of poking out in the back, just like the Shulk on the bottom is. Now this shot's interesting because if we're going by the other 3DS screen, we know that Yoshi's Island from Brawl is a 3DS stage if we're, assuming that to be real. So this could, in fact, be a legitimate thing. And it also seems to be an item, or maybe it looks like an item piece, maybe like a Dragoon piece off to the right. Does this look legit? It's hard. Again, it's so hard to tell. Like, it could be legit. It could be a mod. The text at the top kind of feels like Smash 4 text to me. But I do know that the timer is like in Smash 4 is like in Brawl, where it's the top right. It's not in the middle like it is in Melee. And never ever have you ever played a game of Smash where the word Smash is at the top. That kind of seems, useless. So I'm not really sure why that would even be there in the first place. Then you have the screen of the victory screen here, where you have okay. So I believe that's if we're gonna go by these screens, I guess that other character may be Lucina, but it seems like Tool Shulks to me. I don't know. But anyway, this victory screen, you see Lucina kind of there, and then you see this fully rendered Shulk. This, I think, is the most damning evidence, really. I don't know how you could, kind of create this. So this actually seems kind of legit to me. And then the third screen, where you have a fully rendered kind of Ganondorf, just like in his Twilight Princess look. I think these screens kind of show us more than the roster itself, because this is actual gameplay if we've, come to understand it. And the results screen looks, essentially how we can expect the results screen to look. So I'm not 100% sold, but I feel like these screenshots look way more legit to me than the roster ever will. I also want to point out, though, that the ESR boobs tag is kind of funny, and I don't know, it just seems a little unprofessional to me, but maybe that's like the hint, like, oh, this isn't really real. But who knows? I think the roster, if this is to be legit, hopefully there's more. I, of course, still want Ridley in the game. Dixie Kong or King K. Rool would be cool. I'd love to see the return of Mewtwo and Snake. And I think the addition of the Chorus Kids would be cool as well. But if this is the final roster, I guess I'm not too mad. Bowser Jr. is a character I've wanted for a while. Duck Hunt Dog, it looks really cool. Shulk, I think, was kind of expected. The only ones that kind of disappoint me are Dark Pit and Dr. Mario, where, those seems like, pretty good slots for other characters. But if we're to understand how clones work in this game, it's not that they take up slots, it's that they were only, created because there's a little time left, and to be able to create a clone is a lot easier to create a fully fleshed out character, but we have no idea, we're not involved in direct development ourselves. So, thanks you guys for watching. If there's any more that comes out from these, I will definitely make a video, and we'll be discussing them. So, until next time, I'm the Rapture. A couple more weeks, really, until Smash will release. So if these screens aren't even legit, we'll know very soon.